The stars had always been quiet for humanity. For 300 years, they had spread across 17 star systems, building colonies and mining asteroids, and creating a modest civilization among the cold lights of space. They were not the strongest species in the galaxy. They were not the oldest. But they had survived. And survival was something humans understood better than most. Admiral Nathan Cole stood on the bridge of the starship Resolute and watched the darkness of space change. Sensors had detected something massive approaching from the outer reaches of the system. Now he could see it with his own eyes through the viewport. Ships were emerging from hyperspace. Not dozens. Not hundreds. Thousands of them. The Valori Empire had arrived. Lieutenant Laura Mitchell worked at her console with shaking hands. She had heard stories about the Valori all her life. Everyone had. They were the rulers of half the galaxy, conquerors of over 400 species. No civilization had ever defeated them. No species had ever refused their demands and lived to tell about it. "Admiral," she said, her voice barely steady, "I am counting 12,000 warships. Each one is larger than anything we have ever built." Nathan Cole did not respond immediately. He simply watched the armada spread across the stars like a dark tide rolling toward shore. 12,000 ships. Humanity's entire fleet numbered fewer than 800 vessels, and most of those were small patrol craft designed for pirates and smugglers. They had never prepared for something like this. No one could prepare for something like this. "They are hailing us," Laura said. "Put it through." The main screen flickered to life, and Nathan Cole looked upon the face of humanity's doom. High Commander Xyrith of the Valori Empire stood tall and terrible, his silver-scaled skin gleaming under harsh light, his 4 eyes glowing with ancient contempt. Behind him, officers moved across a bridge that seemed built for giants. "Humans," Xyrith spoke, and his voice carried the weight of countless conquests. "You will surrender your worlds. You will surrender your resources. You will surrender your people. Resistance is irrelevant. We have consumed civilizations far greater than yours. We have broken empires that spanned more stars than you can count. You are nothing to us. Less than nothing. Submit now, and some of you may be permitted to serve." The transmission ended. Xyrith had not waited for a response. In his mind, there was no response worth hearing. Nathan Cole stood in silence for a long moment. Then he turned to Laura Mitchell. "Patch me through to Earth Command. Priority 1. The message reached Earth within the hour. President Daniel Harper convened the United Earth Council in the Great Chamber beneath the Rocky Mountains, where humanity's leaders had gathered in times of crisis for over 2 centuries. They came from every nation and every colony, representatives of a species that had finally learned to work together after millennia of fighting among themselves. Secretary of Defense Catherine Bell presented the situation in stark terms. The Valori fleet outgunned them by a factor of 15 to 1. Their technology was decades more advanced. Their soldiers numbered in the billions. By any rational calculation, humanity had already lost. "We could negotiate," suggested one council member. "Perhaps if we offer them resources, they will accept tribute instead of conquest." "The Valori do not accept tribute," Catherine replied. "They have never accepted tribute from any species. They conquer completely, or they do not engage at all. Surrender means slavery, for everyone, forever." The chamber fell silent. Men and women who had led nations and corporations and armies sat helpless before the weight of what they faced. Some wept quietly, others simply stared at nothing, their minds unable to process the scale of the threat. President Daniel Harper listened to it all. He was not a military man. He had been a teacher before entering politics, a professor of history who had spent decades studying the rise and fall of civilizations. He knew better than anyone how this story usually ended. When a stronger force met a weaker one, the weaker one was destroyed. That was the way of things. That had always been the way of things. But Daniel Harper also knew something else. He knew what humans were capable of when pushed to the edge. He had studied the wars and the plagues and the famines that should have destroyed humanity 100 times over. He had read about the small bands of soldiers who held against impossible odds, about the cities that refused to fall, about the ordinary people who chose death over submission. He stood and addressed the council. "We are going to send them a message," he said. "Just one message." "A message of surrender?" someone asked. "No." Daniel Harper's voice was quiet but firm. "A message of warning." The transmission was prepared within the hour. It was broadcast on all frequencies, in every known language, sent directly to High Commander Zyrith and every ship in the Vylori Armada. The words were simple, the meaning was clear. We are humanity. We do not surrender. We do not kneel. Turn back now, or you will learn why every predator on our world learned to fear us. This is your only warning. High Commander Zyrith received the message on his command ship, surrounded by officers who had helped him conquer a dozen civilizations. He read it once, and then he laughed. His officers laughed with him, their voices echoing through the massive bridge. "Fear them?" Zyrith said, still chuckling. "These creatures with their tiny ships and their primitive weapons want us to fear them? They have fewer than 1,000 vessels. We have 12,000. They have held 17 systems for 3 centuries. We have ruled 400 worlds for 10,000 years." He deleted the message with a casual gesture. "Destroy their outer colonies," he ordered. "Let them see what defiance costs. Let them watch their people burn. And then we will see how long their courage lasts." Sub-Commander Veth bowed and relayed the orders. The Vylori fleet began to move, spreading out toward human space like fingers closing around a throat. On Earth, President Daniel Harper watched the fleet advance on long-range sensors. Catherine Bell stood beside him, her face grim. "They ignored the warning," she said. "I expected they would." "Then why send it?" Daniel Harper turned away from the screen. "Because now, whatever happens next, they cannot say they were not warned. And because our people needed to hear it too. They needed to know that we will not go quietly, that we will fight, that we will make them pay for every world, every city, every life they try to take from us." Catherine Bell nodded slowly. "What do we do now?" "Now?" Daniel Harper looked out at the stars that humanity had worked so hard to reach. "Now we show them what happens when you ignore a warning from humanity." The war had begun. The Vylori attacked the colony on Kepler 442b 3 days after ignoring humanity's warning. It was a farming world, home to nearly 2 million people who had built their lives among rolling green hills and clear blue lakes. Governor Samuel Grant had watched the Vylori fleet approaching for days, knowing what was coming, knowing there was nothing he could do to stop it, but he could deny them their prize. The evacuation order went out the moment the warning was ignored. Transport ships worked around the clock, carrying civilians to hidden locations deeper in human space. Samuel Grant stayed behind with a skeleton crew of volunteers, men and women who understood what needed to be done. When the Vylori warships descended through the atmosphere, their sensors showed empty cities. The streets were deserted. The buildings stood silent. The farms had been stripped of crops and livestock. Even the water treatment plants had been dismantled. High Commander Zyrith watched the landing reports with growing irritation. "Where are the humans?" he demanded. "Gone, High Commander." "Sub-Commander," Veth replied. "They appear to have evacuated before our arrival. Cowards. They run rather than face us." Zyrith gestured dismissively. "Secure the infrastructure. We will use this world as a forward base." The Vylori soldiers spread through the empty city, searching buildings and securing key positions. They found nothing of value. The humans had taken everything they could carry and destroyed everything else. But at least the buildings remained. At least the power grid was intact. At least there was something to claim. Governor Samuel Grant watched from a bunker beneath the Capitol building. His finger rested on a single button connected to fusion charges planted throughout every major structure on the planet. He thought about his wife, safe now on a transport heading for Earth. He thought about his children, who would grow up in a universe where the Vylori could be beaten. He pressed the button. The explosions consumed 18 Vylori vessels and killed over 40,000 soldiers in a single blinding instant. The capital city ceased to exist. Secondary charges destroyed power plants, transportation hubs, and communication centers across the entire planet. When the fire and smoke cleared, The Vylori had conquered nothing but ash and ruins. News of Kepler 442b reached High Commander Zyrith within hours. He listened to the reports in stunned silence. The humans had destroyed their own world, rather than let the Vylori take it. They had killed themselves along with thousands of Vylori soldiers just to deny the Empire a foothold. Primitive spite, Zyrith finally said. Meaningless resistance. Continue the advance. But the pattern repeated at every target. At the mining colony on Glisa, 876, workers collapsed the tunnels and flooded the shafts with toxic gas before the Vylori could land. At the orbital station above Ross 128, engineers overloaded the reactor and took 3 Vylori cruisers with them when it exploded. At every colony, every outpost, every station, humanity left nothing behind but destruction. The Vylori had never encountered anything like this. The species they conquered always tried to preserve something. They surrendered cities to save populations. They gave up resources to protect infrastructure. They made rational calculations about acceptable losses. Humans made no such calculations. They burned everything and asked for nothing in return, except the satisfaction of denying their enemy a victory. Meanwhile, Commander Jack Morrison was teaching the Vylori a different kind of lesson. Morrison had served in the Earth Defense Fleet for 20 years, working his way up from a junior pilot to the commander of a strike squadron. He was not a brilliant tactician or a charismatic leader. He was simply a man who understood one fundamental truth about warfare. The side that controls information controls the battle. His squadron of 12 light frigates hid among the asteroids of Gliese 667, waiting for the Vylori supply convoy that intelligence had predicted. The rocks provided perfect cover, masking their engine signatures and sensor profiles. The Vylori ships passed within striking distance without ever knowing they were there. Morrison gave the signal. 12 frigates erupted from the asteroid field in perfect formation, their weapons already locked onto the fat transport ships at the center of the convoy. The Vylori escort vessels tried to respond, but they were out of position, spread too thin to protect their charges. The attack lasted 4 minutes. 40 transport ships carrying food, ammunition, and medical supplies were destroyed. Morrison's squadron vanished back into the asteroids before the Vylori could organize a pursuit. They fight like vermin, High Commander Zyrith snarled when he received the report. Hiding, scurrying, refusing to face us directly. Vermin that are disrupting our supply lines, Subcommander Veth noted carefully. Our forward divisions are reporting shortages of critical supplies. Zyrith struck him across the face, leaving a bloody gash on his cheek. Then find them and destroy them. But finding humanity was not simple. Their ships were small and fast, designed for exactly this kind of warfare. They did not form battle lines or defend fixed positions. They appeared from nowhere, struck hard, and vanished before the Vylori could respond, and they were learning with terrifying speed. Captain Amanda Torres led the raid that changed everything. Her target was a Vylori dreadnought, one of the massive warships that served as mobile command centers for the invasion fleet. Intelligence suggested it was carrying advanced weapon prototypes that could give humanity a crucial edge. The assault began with precise torpedo strikes that breached the hull in exactly the right locations. Torres led her Marines through the gaps, fighting through corridors in brutal close-quarters combat that the Vylori had never experienced. Their soldiers were trained for ship-to-ship warfare and planetary bombardment, not hand-to-hand fighting in cramped metal tunnels. The humans were different. They had been fighting each other in exactly these conditions for thousands of years. They knew how to clear rooms and hold choke points, and turn every corner into a death trap. They were faster and more aggressive than anything the Vylori had faced. They bite, one surviving Vylori soldier reported later, his voice trembling with something that might have been fear. They claw. They do not stop when wounded. They smile when they die, as long as they take us with them. Torres captured the dreadnought intact. Her engineers stripped it of every piece of useful technology, while her medics treated the wounded, and her soldiers secured Vylori prisoners, who would later provide valuable intelligence. Within 2 months, human ships began appearing with Vylori-grade weapons and improved shields. The technological gap that had seemed insurmountable was closing with impossible speed. High Commander Zyreth reviewed the latest intelligence reports in his private quarters, alone for the first time in days. The numbers were troubling. Losses were higher than projected. Supply lines were strained. Morale among his soldiers was beginning to waver, but it was not the numbers that disturbed him most. It was the feeling growing in his chest, unfamiliar and unwelcome. Something he had not experienced in centuries of conquest. The Vailori had come to claim easy prey. Instead, they had awakened something that refused to die, that learned from every defeat, that grew stronger with every battle. For the first time in his long life, High Commander Zyreth wondered if he had made a terrible mistake. 3 months into the invasion, High Commander Zyreth called a meeting of his senior staff aboard the flagship Eternal Dominion. The great war room, designed to plan the subjugation of civilizations, now felt smaller somehow. The holograms showing human space flickered with red markers indicating ongoing resistance, disrupted supply routes, and contested zones. "We have conquered dozens of their systems," Sub-Commander Veth reported, his voice carefully neutral. "But we hold none of them. Resistance fighters emerge on every occupied world. Supply convoys are attacked daily. Our soldiers disappear in the night, and are found later with their throats cut. This is not war," Zyreth muttered, staring at the map. "This is madness." Strategic analyst Myra stepped forward. She was unusual among the Vailori. A scholar, rather than a warrior. Assigned to study enemy civilizations and identify their weaknesses. She had spent the past 3 months doing exactly that. And what she had learned disturbed her deeply. "High Commander," she said, "I have completed my analysis of humanity. I believe I understand what we are facing." "Then explain. Tell me how a species with inferior ships and inferior numbers continues to resist the greatest military force in the galaxy." Myra activated a new display, filling the room with images from human history. Their homeworld, Earth, was what xenobiologists classify as a death world. Every aspect of their environment was hostile. Predators, diseases, natural disasters, extreme temperatures. The species that survived there did so by becoming the most dangerous things on the planet. She showed them footage recovered from human archives. Ancient battles where humans fought with primitive weapons made of metal and wood. Industrial wars where they deployed chemical weapons and explosive shells that tore bodies apart. Nuclear detonations that vaporized entire cities. They have fought wars among themselves for their entire recorded history, Myra continued. Not occasionally. Constantly. They have developed thousands of methods of killing. Thousands of strategies for destruction. They have concepts we do not even have words for. Guerrilla warfare, terrorism, insurgency. Scorched earth. Every species fights, Zyreth said dismissively. We have conquered warriors before. Not like these. Myra pulled up psychological profiles compiled from interrogations of human prisoners. Most species we conquer fight to protect something. Territory, resources, offspring. When that something is lost or threatened, they surrender to preserve what remains. Humans are different. They fight even when there is nothing left to protect. They fight for abstract concepts. Honor, freedom, spite. They will destroy themselves entirely rather than submit. She showed them the final transmission from Governor Samuel Grant on Kepler 442b. Recorded moments before he detonated the charges that killed him along with 40,000 Vailori soldiers. He had been smiling. They call it the human spirit, Myra said. It is not exhaustion they feel in prolonged struggle. It is purpose. They become more determined as conditions worsen. They find meaning in suffering. They are psychologically adapted for exactly the kind of war we are fighting. High Commander Zyreth sat in silence for a long moment. Around him, his officers exchanged uneasy glances. They had all sensed something wrong about this campaign. Something that did not match their centuries of experience conquering other species. Now they had words for it. What do you recommend? Zyreth finally asked. Myra hesitated. I recommend we withdraw. Negotiate a peace treaty and leave human space. This war cannot be won at acceptable cost. The room erupted in outraged protests. Withdraw? The Valori Empire had never retreated from any campaign in 10,000 years. The very suggestion was unthinkable. Xyrith raised his hand for silence. We will not withdraw. The Emperor would never permit it, and I would never request it. We will increase pressure on their homeworld, cut off the head, and the body will die. On Earth, President Daniel Harper was delivering a speech that would be remembered for centuries. Every human ship, every colony, every resistance cell received the broadcast. Soldiers fighting in the ruins of conquered worlds paused to listen. Civilians huddled in evacuation shelters watched on flickering screens. They thought we would break, Harper said, his voice carrying the weight of humanity's history. They thought our warning was the desperate bluff of a frightened species. But we are not frightened. We have never been frightened. Fear is something we learn to use, not something that uses us. He spoke of humanity's past, the ice ages that should have frozen them to extinction, the plagues that killed half the population of continents, the wars that destroyed civilizations and somehow left survivors who built again from the ashes. We are the descendants of those who tamed fire when the world was dark and cold. We crossed oceans in wooden ships when we did not know what lay beyond the horizon. We reached beyond our world and claimed the stars because we refused to accept limits. We do not know how to surrender. We have never learned. The counteroffensive began 3 days later. Admiral Nathan Cole led the main fleet in a direct assault on the Valori Forward Command Base. By conventional military calculation, it was suicide. 200 human ships against 800 Valori vessels. The numbers guaranteed defeat, but humanity did not fight by conventional calculations. The attack came from 4 directions simultaneously, while Cole's main fleet engaged from the front, drawing the attention of the Valori defenders. 3 other forces emerged from hyperspace in unexpected positions. Commander Jack Morrison's strike group appeared behind the Valori formation. Captain Amanda Torres led her Marines in boarding actions against key vessels. And a 4th force, 30 ships loaded with antimatter warheads, drove directly into the heart of the Valori fleet. They were not trying to survive. They were trying to take as many enemies with them as possible. The Valori had never encountered deliberate self-sacrifice as a tactical choice. Their doctrine assumed that all combatants wanted to live. Their formations were designed to counter enemies who would retreat when threatened. They had no response to ships that accelerated toward them with no intention of stopping. The hesitation lasted only seconds, but seconds were enough. The antimatter ships reached their targets and detonated. The explosions tore through the Valori formation, destroying shields and weapons and engines. In the chaos that followed, human forces pressed their advantage with ruthless efficiency. By the time the battle ended, humanity had lost 90 ships. The Valori had lost 400, including their forward command vessel and 3 admirals. High Commander Xyrith received the news in stunned silence. 400 ships. More than they had lost in the previous decade of conquest combined. And the humans were celebrating their victory even as they mourned their dead. What are these creatures? He whispered. And for the first time in his long life, there was genuine fear in his voice. Strategic analyst Myra stood in the shadows, watching her commander. She had warned him. She had told him exactly what humanity was. And he had not listened. Now, she suspected, it was too late to listen. 6 months into the war, the Valori Empire faced something that had not happened in 10,000 years of conquest. They were losing. The change did not come all at once. There was no single battle that turned the tide. No dramatic moment when victory slipped from their grasp. Instead, it happened slowly, steadily, like water wearing away stone. Human guerrillas made occupied territories ungovernable. Human raiders crippled supply lines. Human engineers closed the technological gap and, in some areas, began to surpass their enemies. But the most devastating blow came from an unexpected direction. Word of the war had spread across the galaxy through smugglers and traders, and escaped prisoners. Species long conquered by the Valori, peoples who had accepted subjugation as the natural order of the universe, began to hear stories. Stories of a small civilization that had refused to kneel. Stories of colonists who destroyed their own worlds rather than surrender. Stories of soldiers who smiled as they died. as long as they took their enemies with them. Stories of a single message, ignored, that had heralded the beginning of the end. The first rebellion erupted on Cathara Prime, a world that had been under Valori control for 300 years. The Cathari had been model subjects, compliant and productive, their spirits seemingly broken generations ago. But now they rose up in their millions, overwhelming the garrison with sheer numbers, capturing weapons depots, and broadcasting a simple message to the stars. If the humans can fight, so can we. Within a month, 17 Valori worlds were burning with rebellion. Sub-Commander Veth stood before High Commander Xyrith with reports that grew worse by the hour. The Dravani have seized control of their sector's communication network. The Morath are attacking shipping lanes. The Silith have assassinated their planetary governor and declared independence. Our forces are stretched beyond capacity. How did this happen? Xyrith demanded. These species surrendered generations ago. They accepted our rule. Strategic analyst. Myra answered from her position near the door. They accepted it because they believed it was inevitable. The humans have shown them otherwise. Hope is contagious, High Commander. It spreads faster than any weapon. On Earth, Secretary of Defense Catherine Bell coordinated the growing alliance from a command center that never slept. Species that had never worked together now shared intelligence, resources, and tactics. Human military advisors appeared on rebel worlds, teaching guerrilla warfare to beings who had never conceived of resistance. Captain Amanda Torres led a team of trainers to the Cathari homeworld. She found a population eager to learn, hungry for any knowledge that might help them throw off their chains. She taught them how to make explosives from common chemicals. She showed them how to disable armored vehicles with simple tools. She explained the principles of ambush and misdirection and psychological warfare. Why are you helping us? A Cathari leader asked her one night. Your own people are dying in this war. Why spend resources on our fight? Torres considered the question carefully before answering. Because we are not just fighting for ourselves anymore. Every world that sees us fight learns that the Valori can be beaten. Every battle we win gives someone else the courage to try. If we help you become free, you might help someone else become free. And eventually, there will be so many free peoples that no empire will ever be able to conquer them all. The Cathari leader was silent for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. We understand now. You are not just waging a war. You are spreading a fire. High Commander Xyrith requested reinforcements from the Valori homeworld. He had done this many times before in his career, and reinforcements had always arrived promptly. The Empire's military resources were vast, its reserves seemingly endless. The response this time was devastating. There were no reinforcements to send. The rebellions across the Empire required every available ship. Sectors that had been stable for centuries now demanded constant military presence. The great Valori war machine, built over millennia of conquest, was now fighting on 100 fronts simultaneously. The Emperor commands you to end this quickly. The message from home concluded. Destroy their homeworld. Make an example of them. Show the galaxy what happens to those who defy us. Xyrith gathered his remaining forces. 4,000 ships. Everything he could spare from occupation duties and defensive positions. It would be a hammer blow, overwhelming and final. Without their homeworld, humanity would collapse. Without Earth, they would lose their center, their symbol, their heart. We strike in 3 days, he announced to his commanders. Full assault on the Sol system. We will burn their world and salt the ashes. We will broadcast their destruction to every corner of the galaxy, and we will show all who watch that the Valori Empire cannot be defied. But humanity had been preparing for this moment from the beginning. Commander Jack Morrison's intelligence network had been tracking Valori fleet movements for months. He knew about the concentration of forces. He knew about the target. He knew about the timeline, and he reported everything directly to Admiral Nathan Cole and President Daniel Harper. They are coming for Earth, Morrison said in his final briefing. 4,000 ships, everything they have left. Can we stop them? President Harper asked. Admiral Cole shook his head slowly. Not in a direct engagement. We have 300 ships that can reach Sol in time. Even with our improved technology, those odds are too long. Then we do not fight directly, Secretary Catherine Bell said. She activated a display showing a project that had been humanity's most closely guarded secret for 3 years. We use Prometheus. Project Prometheus had begun before the war, when humanity first learned that the Valori Empire existed. Scientists and engineers had worked in hidden facilities, pursuing a single objective, a weapon that could end any conflict in one stroke. Not a bomb, not a fleet, something far more devastating. A hyperspace disruptor capable of collapsing jump points across an entire sector. The technology was based on theoretical physics that even its creators did not fully understand. It required more energy than most civilizations produced in a year, and it had never been tested, because testing it would reveal its existence to anyone watching. If we activate this, Admiral Cole said, we will strand the Valori fleet in our space, cut them off from resupply, from reinforcement, from retreat. 4,000 ships trapped among enemies, with nowhere to run. Lieutenant Laura Mitchell, now serving on Cole's command staff, voiced the question everyone was thinking. If they cannot retreat, they will have no choice but to fight to the death. We will have to destroy them all. No, President Harper said quietly. They will have another choice. They just need to be shown what it is. He looked around the room at the faces of humanity's leaders. Tired faces, grieving faces, faces that had seen too much death and destruction over the past 6 months, but also determined faces, faces that had never accepted defeat. Prepare Prometheus, he ordered, and prepare a message. When this is over, history will remember that we gave them every chance to survive. Even our enemies deserve that much. The final battle for Earth was about to begin. The Valori fleet emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the Sol system like a storm breaking over calm waters. 4,000 warships spread across the darkness, their weapons charged, their crews eager for vengeance. High Commander Xyrith stood on the bridge of the Eternal Dominion and looked upon the blue-green world that had caused his empire so much pain. Earth, the homeworld of humanity, the source of the fire that was burning across the galaxy. Today, it would burn for real. Report, Xyrith commanded. Sub-Commander Veth studied his sensors with growing confusion. High Commander, I am detecting only 50 human ships defending the system. 50. They have positioned themselves between us and their world, but they cannot possibly stop us. They have accepted their fate, Xyrith said with grim satisfaction. At last, they understand that resistance is futile. Destroy their fleet and begin orbital bombardment. I want every city on that planet reduced to molten glass. The Valori armada surged forward like a predator closing in for the kill. The 50 human ships held their position for a moment, as if weighing their options, and then began a slow retreat toward Earth. They were buying time, Xyrith realized, hoping for some miracle that would never come. Pursue them, he ordered. Do not let them reach planetary defenses. I want this finished quickly. The fleet accelerated, driving deeper into the Sol system. Past the outer planets with their swirling clouds. Past the asteroid belt where human miners had once worked in peace. Past Mars, where the first human colony beyond Earth had been established centuries ago. Closer and closer to the blue world that represented everything the Valori hated about this war. They were halfway between Mars and Earth when the trap was sprung. The hyperspace disruptor activated with a pulse of energy that rippled through dimensions human scientists did not fully understand. Across the entire sector, jump points flickered and collapsed. The highways between stars, the paths that connected the Valori fleet to their empire, simply ceased to exist. High Commander, Veth said, his voice tight with sudden fear. Our hyperspace drives are offline. All of them. I am receiving reports from across the fleet. No one can engage their drives. Interference, Xyrith said. They are jamming us. Find the source and destroy it. This is not jamming, High Commander. Veth's hands trembled as he worked his console. The jump points themselves are gone. There is no hyperspace access anywhere in this sector. We cannot leave. We cannot retreat. We cannot call for help. Before Xyrith could respond, the rest of humanity's fleet arrived. Ships emerged from behind moons and asteroids and orbital platforms. 300 vessels, every warship humanity could gather, now surrounding the trapped Valori armada. They were still outnumbered more than 10 to 1. But the Valori were cut off, isolated, stranded in enemy territory with no hope of reinforcement. Admiral Nathan Cole's face appeared on the Valori communication screens. He looked tired. Gray had crept into his hair over the past 6 months. Lines had formed around his eyes that had not been there before. But his voice was steady, and his gaze did not waver. "High Commander Zyrith," he said, "your fleet is cut off. Your supply lines are gone. Your empire is burning with rebellions you cannot suppress. Your soldiers are stranded among enemies who will never stop fighting." He paused, letting the weight of the words settle. "This is the doom we promised you 6 months ago. This is what our warning meant. You ignored it, and now you face the consequences." Zyrith clenched his fists, rage building in his chest. "You think this changes anything? We still have 4,000 ships. We will destroy your fleet and your planet, and find a way home through your ashes." "You could try," Cole acknowledged. "You might even succeed, but your fleet will be shattered in the attempt. Your soldiers will die by the millions, and even if you destroy Earth, our colonies will continue fighting. Our allies will continue rising. You will gain nothing except corpses." The Admiral leaned forward slightly. "But we are offering you something no one has ever offered the Valori. A choice. Surrender now, and your soldiers will live. They will be treated with dignity. They will be fed, and housed, and given medical care. When this war ends, they will be returned to their families. No executions, no slavery, just peace." "The Valori do not surrender," Zyrith snarled. "We would rather die than submit to lesser species." "Then you will die," Cole replied simply. "All of you. Every ship, every soldier, every life in your fleet. And the galaxy will watch and learn that the Valori were not invincible. They were just bullies who finally met someone who hit back." The transmission ended. Zyrith stood motionless, staring at the blank screen. Around him, his officers waited in tense silence. They had followed him through countless campaigns, conquered countless worlds, broken countless enemies. They had never faced anything like this. Sub-Commander Veth spoke carefully. "High Commander, perhaps we should consider the offer. Our soldiers have families. Our empire needs us to return, to help restore order. If we die here, we accomplish nothing." Zyrith turned on him with fury in his eyes. "You would have us surrender? Crawl before these primitives and beg for mercy?" "I would have us survive," Veth replied. "To fight another day. To rebuild and return stronger. That is not cowardice. That is strategy. It is weakness." Zyrith raised his hand to strike the sub-commander. "And weakness is not tolerated in the Valori Empire." He never completed the blow. Strategic analyst Myra had been standing in the shadows, forgotten in the chaos of the moment. Now she moved with a speed and precision that surprised everyone, including herself. The blade she had carried since her youth, a gift from a mother who had taught her that knowledge was not always enough, slid through Zyrith's neck before anyone could react. The High Commander fell, and his blood spread across the deck of his flagship. Myra looked at the body for a moment, then turned to the communication console. Her voice was calm when she spoke. "This is Acting Commander Myra of the Valori Fleet. High Commander Zyrith is dead. The Valori Fleet surrenders. We accept your terms." Across the Sol system, human crews watched in disbelief as the Valori weapons powered down. Admiral Cole ordered his forces to hold position, hardly daring to believe what he was seeing. On Earth, President Daniel Harper sank into his chair and wept with relief. The war did not end that day, but its conclusion became inevitable. Without their main fleet, without their unbroken record of victory, the Valori Empire crumbled. Rebellions that had been struggling now surged forward with renewed hope. Worlds that had been hesitating now declared independence. The empire that had ruled through fear discovered that fear once broken, could never be restored. 3 years later, the last Valori holdouts surrendered. The empire was gone, replaced by a loose federation of liberated worlds. Humanity took no territory from the conflict. They demanded no tribute, sought no dominion, claimed no throne. "That is it?" the representative of the Valori remnant asked during the peace negotiations. "You could rule the galaxy. You could become what we were. Why do you not take what you have won?" President Daniel Harper smiled tiredly. "We fought to prove that tyranny can be defeated. Becoming tyrants ourselves would make everything meaningless. We did not fight for power. We fought for the right to exist on our own terms." Secretary Catherine Bell added. "And for hope. For every species that watched us and found the courage to stand up. That hope is worth more than any empire." Admiral Nathan Cole, retired now and content to spend his remaining years on the Earth he had helped save, spoke the final word. "We told you in our message. We do not surrender. We do not kneel. That is not a threat or a boast. It is simply what we are, and it is what any free people can be, if they choose." In the centuries that followed, the message humanity sent became legend. Scholars and historians studied it, searching for hidden meaning, for strategic brilliance, for the secret of how a minor species had brought down the greatest empire in galactic history. They never found it. The truth was simpler than any theory. Humanity had looked into the face of annihilation and said no. Not cleverly, not strategically, just stubbornly, defiantly. Absolutely no. And that, in the end, had been enough.